Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is going to be a report from the first two matches at the ETC on the first day. So I went there with my Empire of Sun style army for Team Netherlands, and this is the list. After all the battle reports, I'll also talk you a bit through the list in a separate video. So my first matchup was against Mr Gobo from Team Croatia. He was playing this Orcs and Goblins list, so he has a couple of trolls, he has some scrap wagons, splatterers, all the other good stuff, some orcs with shields and bows. I thought it was quite a decent matchup for me because he focuses quite heavily on the bows, on the pyromancy, and he doesn't really have a lot to deal with my blocks other than the trolls. And then I do have a flaming standard on one unit of Knights of the Sun Griffin, and I do have my blessings and glory of gold if I want to. So those are also the spells that I definitely took. So for deployment, I just have a couple of pictures. The ETC is a crazy tournament. There's so much going on everywhere. There's tables everywhere where games are being played, and it's quite easy to get distracted and not take the pictures that you want to take. So yeah, for this battles I do have only 3 pictures, unfortunately, even though 3 is apparently already quite a lot, going from the standard of the amount of pictures that I made for some battles. So for deployment on my side, we have from left to right the State Militia, the Knights of the Sun Griffin with Banner of Discipline. Then next to the building we have the Knights of the Sun Griffin with the Flaming Standard, the Arcane Engine in the back. To the right of that we have Heavy Infantry, the Electoral Cavalry with all the characters, more Heavy Infantry, and the Knights of the Sun Griffin with Banner of Discipline. For my opponent, left to right, we have a Pump Wagon, we have another Pump Wagon, we have a Orc Chariot, I believe. Then we have 40 bow orcs, we have a splatter, another wizard on chariot. I believe this is the witchcraft one if I'm not mistaken. Then we have trolls, we have the Great Green Idol, we have a splatterer, we have the boar boys with the general on board and the wizard master on board. We have the Grotlings that are in the ruins that have scouted. We have orcs, many of them, with bows, and then we have a splatter in the corner with a wizard on pyromancy, that one, and another pump wagon. So this was the deployment of my opponent. My opponent dropped for first turn, which I found to be quite okay. The advantage that I have in this manner is that I can just perfectly align my Knights of the Sun Griffin with Flaming Standard, with his trolls, obviously. And I also get to see on which side of the table I have to concentrate my forces. I think it's a decent decision for my opponent to corner up a bit. I don't think it's a good decision to drop for first turn. Obviously, you lose 3 shots from the splatterers if you give me the first turn. However, if I try to deploy everything, I can deploy everything in one go, take first turn, and be a bit more spread out. Then I would have one Knight of the Sun Griffin unit on the other side of the building, probably. But the advantage then would be that I cannot really put the flaming attacks where I want them to go. So I don't know if I would have deployed everything I have had I had the chance. But anyway, my opponent just deployed first. So what do we see? We see that he put his Grotlings quite far up ahead in the ruins. I have my Electoral Cavalry with Stalker Standard that I can counter deploy to go into the ruins. And this is actually quite a juicy scenario for me, because then I can go into the ruins and I can trigger the frenzy check on my opponent's Wizard Master. I am in the ruins, so I will be getting some cover from the ruins themselves, even though it doesn't give me any cover against the catapults. But then again, if my opponent wants to charge me, I'm in the ruins, so he's going to lose quite a lot of models, especially the cavalry that might want to charge me, but it's going to lose a third of the models in there. So it's not really a juicy charge target. Also for the scrappling wagons, the pump wagons, it's not that juicy, even though they probably will survive and they only have to deliver their impact hits. I thought this was quite a good setup for me because I can just go into the ruins with my cavalry and then force my opponent to do something about it. That is basically what happened. So my opponent took first turn, I believe at least. And he shot a bit, then in my turn I charged the Grotlings. And then, yeah, I just defeated the Grotlings. I advanced up a little bit with my Knights of the Sun Griffin. I actually think that my opponent had the first turn, because then in his first turn, he had to take a frenzy test, and he failed the test, so his Wizard Master had to charge. And in this scenario, he has two choices. Either the Wizard Master charges out of the unit, because he's the only model that's frenzy in the unit, or the entire unit's gonna charge. Well, he also asked me, like, well, what do you think is better? And I was like, well, I don't know, man. I could have said I think it's better to just charge out your Wizard Master, because if you charge with the entire unit, you're probably going to lose the game. Because I had a unit of buffed up Knights of the Sun Griffin with the Flaming Standard. They had advanced. They were in charge range on a 10 or an 11. But I had put double perception of strength on his boars. So on the charge, they would be strength 3. And the Omen of Apocalypse would also be only strength, well, maximum strength 7. Strength 5 to 7, I think. So that is not ideal if you're facing especially Knights of the Sun Griffin that have distracting on them from the Arcane Engine. But my opponent, he decided not to go into the cavalry that were situated in the ruins, which is a good call, because I would have had 2 counter charges with my heavy infantry and I would have definitely broken him. But he did charge into the Knights of the Sun Griffin with the Flaming Standard that had advanced a bit. And basically he just got broken down there. I don't even remember if it happened in his turn or in mine, but he didn't manage to quite go through the chickens. And basically that was the start of the end of the game already. So the next picture I have is after my turn 2. So you see that, well, there's in the forests in the middle, basically there's my cavalry. So they got to make a flank charge onto the trolls, break them, and overrun into the big block of archers. And then, meanwhile, the shaman and the general, they broke from the combat, from the Knights of the Sun Griffin. They fled away, and they were now in the forest, so they were ready to rally. On the right flank, I managed to push through a unit of Knights of the Sun Griffin. On the left flank, I managed to push through 1 unit. My opponent was, well, counter-charging a little bit. But the only check I had to make during this game was the one where my opponent did charge with the Boar Chariot and a Scrappling Wagon into the Knights of the Sun Griffin on the left side. He managed to charge him in at the same time, and I managed to not save that much or not do that many wounds, so I lost by 1 and I made the steadfast check. Yeah, otherwise this was basically already the game. So I did break the orcs in the middle, I did break the orcs on the right side, even though that took a long time. And later, if we go to the next picture, you can see that my electoral cavalry are still up against the orcs, the warlord, and the shaman. They actually survived for quite a long time, and I mostly focused on defensive buffs to try and break them with my static combat res. However, that didn't really happen, so in the end I just managed to go for a reroll to wound and +1 strength, I believe, or something like that. And I managed to kill the orc, and then that was basically the end of the game. So this was my first 20-0 of the tournament, and I will update you with any more to come. So the next matchup was Infernal Dwarfs. This was against Team Canada. I was playing Alex, and this was his list. I think that generally people thought that Infernal Dwarfs was a good matchup against my army. Obviously, Infernal Dwarfs is quite geared towards beating armor with the Quicksilver Lash hits, the Volcanic Embrace hits from the Kadim Titan, for example, and the Kadim Incarnates. However, on the table you don't really have that much in the end, and I don't really know if it's sufficient normally. So this is a matchup where I only have one picture, but I can talk you through what happened in the game. So as you can see, I took first turn. I did manage to take first turn. My opponent doesn't really have a gun line, or not something that is really a gun line, with not that much shooting even. So I wasn't too concerned about having to rush in. However, I mean, the cavalry, they really like going in quite aggressively. Because of all the counter charges that I have with the heavy infantry. My opponent not having any meaningful chaff other than the vassal levies really helped in this game. I know that some people would like to include some more chaff in my list. However, I think that the discipline tests that chaff can cause to my Knights of the Sun Griffin are a bit risky. I mean, it's a discipline 8 test if I'm out of leadership bubble, and I will be out of discipline bubble quite a lot of times. And I also saw that a single tower test can already make quite a difference in this list. Yeah, so I advanced up like this. So I have my arcane engine that is within 6 inches of the knights, within 6 inches of the flaming standard knights of the Sun Griffin, even though the flaming standard is not that useful. And I'm just generally advancing basically. So my plan for this was that the cavalry could easily take on the Infernal engine, mostly because of the Knight Commander with strength 7 and the AP3 that is on the unit. I think I would prefer to take it with the cavalry than with the chickens, because it's the Infernal engine is a counter charge piece, so I can get stuck in combat. So as long as I can reliably win combat, or at least be stable enough to not break away from the combat through minimized discipline from my order, I can just grind out the tank. Obviously, there's the Titan, the Kadim Titan with Volcanic Embrace. However, with Combat Rest, that should also be fine, I think. So what happened in my opponent's turn is that he angled the arcane, or the the Infernal engine. Sorry. I think it's not a random movement piece. I'm not sure. I think he just angled it a bit towards my knights. I still thought that it was my main charge target. On the right side of the Infernal engine are the Kadim, no, not the Disciples of Lugar. And then on the right of that are vassal levies, and all the way on the left are also vassal levies. So my opponent wanted to use a Relentless Company banner to chaff my knights. However, he couldn't quite make it with the 15-inch move. I don't know if that was a misplay on my opponent's part, or if I just went to the right place of the board. But he couldn't get there, so that was quite convenient for me. In my turn, I could charge into the Infernal engine. I did quite a lot of wounds. My opponent, however, had cast a 5-up Aegis on it, so I couldn't get through, and I left it on 1 wound. Because I was able to... I don't remember exactly, but I believe I was able to charge in with both my knights and my Knights of the Sun Griffin that are on the right side of it. And then on my opponent's turn, we were still engaged in combat. My opponent could charge my cavalry with the Kadim Chariot, with the Kadim Titan, and then the Knights of the Sun Griffin. He could charge with the Disciples, and he could charge in the flank with the Vassal Levies. So we had one big combat where everything that was involved was the Kadim Chariot, Kadim Titan, my cavalry, the Infernal engine, the Disciples of Lugar, his BSB, his Wizard Master, the Vassal Levies, and my Knights of the Sun Griffin. Me having distracting and a countercharge available, so I could countercharge and bring some extra static combat rest in the combat. And he tried to grind down my units. I did the last wound on the Infernal engine, and my opponent did quite a decent job on the knights with the Kadim Titan mostly. However, the advantage of a combat situation like this is that the wounds they do carry over as long as you started in the same combat for combat rest. So the Knights of the Sun Griffin, they were able to do quite a number on the Vessel Levies and the Lugars, whilst they didn't really get a lot of damage back. So in total in that combat, I believe I did 12 wounds or so. My opponent did a bit less. So in the end, I believe I won by, I would have to remember, I believe I won by 5 or 6. So that meant that the Kadim item anyway evaporated, and the Kadim chariot, it might have stuck actually. But the Knights of the Sun Griffin, I think they lost a guy or something. My opponent was steadfast with both units. So he just stuck around. I grinded that out for quite a while. Eventually, him breaking that unit of Knights of the Sun Griffin, another unit of Knights of the Sun Griffin coming in, obliterating everything. So the main point that I think was a good play on my part in this game was the right flank, where I just put up my Knights of the Sun Griffin to be in a threatening position. I didn't want to get charged by the Kadim Incarnates because there's 6 of them, and it's quite interesting to be on the receiving end of a charge with Knights of the Sun Griffin if the adversary is a unit of Kadim Incarnates. But my opponent seemed to have the same plan, so we just had a stare off, and I think that was a good play from on my side. I could use my State Militia on that side to one turn chaff my opponent. I believe in the end I actually got a charge off on the Kadim Incarnates, and then I found out that it's not even that scary for the chickens. Because on the charge you strike first, you have still, with a frontage of 4 wide, you have a total of 19 attacks, 12 from the chickens and 7 from the riders. You hit on 3+, you wound on 2+, and 3+ for the chickens. So you do quite a lot of wounds, so in the end you're gonna face at most 4 of the guys, having done 6 wounds yourself. And 6 wounds is not even that much if you have charged. So you'll likely have done more wounds, but even if the opponent has 4 of the guys left and he hits you 4 times on a 2+ with AP 10, sure, that hurts. But the rest of the attacks, they are 4+ to hit and 3+ to wound with AP 2. So that would be, in the end, something like 2 wounds, so then you would still draw. And then you have to charge on a banner, so then the enemy loses by 2. So even if you have quite a bad roll on the charge, you will still win the combat, and yeah, in the end you will crumble him down, because he's agility 3 and you're agility 4 with the chickens. So that's not really something I realized before, but that's actually quite a good matchup for the chickens still. Yeah, you will get quite some damage on your chicks, but they will pull through. Yeah, so that was the second game. First day I had really enjoyable games, and I was quite happy to have 2 20-0s, obviously. Yeah, that's going to be my thought for the day. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you the next time.